Danny wants to buy a massage chair, but he has no money. So he decides to go to Charlie the moneylender to borrow money. Six months later, today Danny is here to return Charlie the money that he owed. So why is this happening? Why is Danny only returning a fraction of what he owed to Charlie? This is because inflation has occurred. So what is inflation? Inflation can be defined as an economic situation where there is a sustained increase in general price level. There are generally two types of inflation: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. For instance, in Danny's case, debtors have an advantage over creditors during a period of inflation because money value has dropped. Cost push inflation itself is divided into four major types of inflation: wage push inflation, import price push inflation, profit push inflation, and tax push inflation. Cost push inflation occurs when there are persistent rises in cost of production such as labor, water, electricity, and other raw materials such as metal. Cost push inflation can also be better explained using economic analysis. In this case, the x-axis is the real national income and y-axis is general price level, with the aggregate demand curve constant at AD0. As firms face rise in cost, they will respond by raising prices and passing some of the cost to consumers by cutting back on production. This is shown in the diagram, where the shift of the aggregate supply curve from AS0 to AS2 causes the general price level to rise to P2 and the level of output to fall to Q2. Demand pull inflation occurs when there are persistent rises in aggregate demand, which may be due to rises in consumer demand for goods and services, increase in investment by firms, increase in government expenditure, as well as increase in net exports. Demand pull inflation can also be better explained using economic analysis. Goods and services may be limited in supply, either because the economy is operating at full capacity or if supply is slow in responding to changes in the market conditions. In either case, the result is an increase in the general level of prices as shown by a shift from AD0 to AD1 to AD2 in the diagram. As the economy moves closer towards full employment of resources, resources become scarcer and firms will respond to the rise in demand by increasing their prices as they are unable to continually increase their output. Therefore, if an economy is almost at or at full employment of resources, demand pull inflation will be triggered by increases in AD. As cost push inflation and demand pull inflation keep occurring, this will lead to a phenomenon called wage price spiral. So how exactly does the wage price spiral occur? Suppose consumer expenditure keep increasing, such as people keep buying goods and services, which will cause aggregate demand to increase. In this case, it will cause demand pull inflation. As seen from the previous scenario, demand pull inflation will occur, which will require the government to come up with solutions to solve this. This can be in the form of increasing taxes on imported raw materials, increasing employers' CPF contribution in Singapore's context, or decreasing subsidies to firms, which will deter investments, hence solving demand pull inflation. However, at the same time, this may then, in turn, cause cost-push inflation instead. In this case, demand pull inflation will cause cost-push inflation to occur. This can be further explained through economic analysis. In this case, an increase in aggregate demand is shown by a rightward shift of the aggregate demand curve from AD0 to AD1, and this will cause an increase in price from P0 to P1, and a similar increase in quantity from Q0 to Q1. This increase in demand will cause the aggregate supply to decrease, shown by an upward movement of the aggregate supply curve from AS0 to AS1. And this cycle will then go on with a persistent increase in aggregate demand, shown by an increase from AD1 to AD2, as well as a decrease in aggregate supply, shown by a constant upward movement of the AS curve from AS1 to AS2, and this is known as the wage price spiral.
If inflation is not managed properly, a country may end up to be like Zimbabwe, where the inflation rate is so high you can buy an egg for a certain amount of money in the morning and it will cost you 10 times that price if you bought it in the afternoon. As such, people in Zimbabwe are stuck in a poverty cycle and can't get out. Hence, it is very important for all countries to carefully manage their inflation rates before anything negative happens to their country. With this, we end our video.